My birthday party turned into a battlefield. After he announced our divorce, I exposed his affair. Maggie Reynolds stood in front of the mirror, smoothing out the soft blue dress she had chosen for her 35th birthday celebration. The elegant salon at the upscale New York restaurant buzzed softly with conversations and clinking glasses behind the heavy velvet curtains. This night was supposed to be hers, a simple gathering of close family and friends, a testament to the life she had quietly built, steadfast and full of hope. A devoted middle school teacher, known for her patient smile and nurturing heart, had always placed others before herself, especially in her marriage to Andrew. For years, she had whispered reassurances to herself that things would get better, that love would find its way back through patience and kindness. But tonight, shadows lingered beneath Andrew's polished exterior, thorns hiding behind those once familiar eyes. The warm hum of voices carried through the room as Maggie greeted guests with gentle hugs and polite smiles. Her mother, beaming with pride, fussed over the arrangement of flowers. Olivia, her closest friend since college, laughed easily, trying to lighten the mood. The soft glow from the chandeliers reflected off crystal glasses, the promise of toasted memories. Everything seemed perfect, fragile as glass, but shimmering. Maggie's heart fluttered with anticipation. She wanted nothing more than to feel cherished for just this evening, to push aside the doubt and weary loneliness those past silent dinners with Andrew had dragged into her bones. As the clock chimed the hour, the room quieted, guests raising their glasses to Maggie in a chorus of happy birthday. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. This moment, after so many sacrifices and lonely nights, should have been full of warmth. But then Andrew stepped forward from the back of the room, the faintest trace of a smirk playing on his lips, a prelude to the storm to come. The air shifted immediately. Conversations halted, eyes turned, all attention snapping toward him. Clearing his throat, Andrew's voice was unnervingly calm. "Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. But I have something important to announce, to Maggie and to all of you." A pause stretched like taut wire. "I'm filing for divorce, and I haven't been faithful. I've been involved with someone else for months." The words fell like ice in the warm room. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers flooded ears. Some faces froze in shock, others softened with pity. But Maggie felt only the sharp needle of betrayal stabbed deep into her chest. For a moment, she was adrift, her mind scrambling to grasp the surreal horror. The guests' eyes flickered between Andrew and her, a silent theater of judgment and curiosity unfolding. She swallowed hard, struggling to clamp down the rising betrayal, but her hands trembled. The room, once alive with laughter and light, was suffocating, heavy with disbelief. This was her birthday. The night meant to envelop her in love and support, turned into a cruel spectacle, a battlefield where her dignity was stripped before the eyes of those she cared for most. Andrew's gaze was distant, cold, lacking the warmth she once cherished. He had chosen this moment, her moment, to dismantle the life they'd built, to humiliate her with calculated precision. Maggie's breath hitched as tears escaped, silently sliding down her cheeks. The weight of humiliation pressed down so fiercely she felt as if the floor might open beneath her feet, swallowing her whole. Amid the shocked silence, she managed to hold her posture, her voice a faint whisper as she greeted the swelling ache inside her, knowing this was only the beginning of a long, painful chapter. She stood there, heart pounding, as the room's eyes lingered on her every move, some with sympathy, others with cruel fascination. The party that was meant to celebrate life had become a cage, and Maggie was trapped in the glare of a truth she had not chosen to reveal. Yet beneath the surface of her silent suffering stirred a quiet flicker of resolve. She would not let this moment define her. But for now, she was alone, vulnerable, and drowning under the weight of a public judgment she never deserved. The room remained frozen for what felt like an eternity, the initial shock transforming into an overwhelming wave of whispers, sideways glances, and stifled gasps. Maggie's chest tightened, the weight of every stare embedding itself like icy shards deep in her skin. The very people she had trusted, for warmth, for support, now seemed to retreat behind half-masks of polite discomfort with thinly veiled disappointment. Even Olivia, sitting a few seats away, glanced at her with an expression tangled in sadness and helplessness. Andrew, emboldened by the silence, finally sank back into his chair, arms crossed, eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the room's ornate moldings. His announcement had sent ripples of shock, but more insidiously, it unleashed a tide of judgment. Maggie felt her world crumble, the truth of his betrayal not just in the words, but in the calculated cruelty of revealing it at her birthday celebration. Her mind flurried with the deafening hum of humiliation, and the slow, painful realization dawned. Andrew had no intention of allowing her grace or dignity to survive that night. Certain guests averted their eyes, their whispers morphing into quiet condemnations. How could she not have seen it? Was their marriage already over? What a mess! The undercurrent of blame twisted deep in Maggie's veins, coiling tightly with the burning sting of betrayal. The woman she was, a devoted mother, a nurturing teacher, the glue holding countless lives together, felt shredded into pieces by an audience of hesitant onlookers. The injustice was suffocating, a double-edged sword that branded her not only as a victim, but, in the most unspoken way, as the scapegoat of years of problems she had quietly endured alone. Her lips quivered, but no sob escaped. Instead, she focused on her breathing, desperate to steady the tempest roiling inside. The hot prickling of tears threatened to spill over again, but she blinked them back fiercely. It was a battle for survival, waged inside that elegantly decorated room. A war not of fists, but of shame and world-shattering disbelief. Olivia gently reached across the table and grasped Maggie's hand. The warmth was a lifeline in a sea of cold indifference. "Maggie, you don't deserve this," she whispered, voice trembling just enough to betray her own sorrow. Maggie nodded, a silent thank you, even as her heart ached from the betrayal not just of Andrew, but of the fragile trust that had once bound their circle of friends. Amid the swirling chaos, Maggie's mind wandered to the hours, days, and years leading to this moment. The quiet dinners when Andrew's attention was elsewhere, the missed birthdays and forgotten promises, the subtle detachment that she had tried to ignore for the sake of their family. She glimpsed, for the first time unfiltered, the loneliness that had settled into her bones, a hollow ache that Andrew's affair had only deepened. Her face flushed with shame, not for the betrayal she had suffered, but for the way the world was silently faulting her, as if the revelation was her failing to fix what was broken. As guests began to shift uncomfortably, murmuring apologies and making excuses to exit early, the night darkened further for Maggie. She could feel the sting of humiliation burning on her cheeks, the whispered speculations amplifying the pain. Her birthday, meant to celebrate life, had been weaponized into a public spectacle where her anguish was out in the open, dissected and dissecting in turn. Yet in the quiet recesses of her soul, a fragile ember glowed, an unwillingness to be consumed by this night alone. The rawness of her pain morphed into a simmering determination. She had been knocked down, but not out. If you've ever faced injustice when you least expected it, you understand how it tests every fragment of your strength. But remember, even the deepest wounds can heal, and from them, courage can rise. This was Maggie's first whispered truth to herself, the flicker of a resolve that would not fade even as the night threatened to swallow her whole. In the days following the disastrous birthday party, Maggie found herself navigating a fog of pain and disbelief. The echoes of Andrew's announcement still haunted the quiet edges of her home, the silence where laughter once lived, the empty spaces where his presence had softened her daily struggles. Each day was an uneven dance between holding herself together and crumbling beneath the gravity of betrayal. She tried returning to her routines, grading papers, preparing lesson plans, attending parent-teacher meetings, but the weight of humiliation clung to her like a shadow, thick and unyielding. At school, colleagues whispered behind closed doors, their sideways glances reminding Nagy that her private anguish had become public fodder. Even students who once sought her guidance now seemed uncertain, their innocent questions carrying a subtle discomfort. The bright, encouraging presence Maggie once radiated felt dimmed, muted by the relentless sting of the gossip storms swirling just beyond sight. Trying to reclaim control, Nagy reached out to Andrew, cautiously proposing a calm conversation. Perhaps there was a way to salvage civility in the wreckage of their marriage. But her calls went unanswered, messages unopened. The cold neglect was another wound, sharp and isolating. She learned that Andrew had moved into a small apartment uptown, a physical and emotional distance that suffocated her hope. The man who once held her hand in comfort had distanced himself completely, choosing silence and avoidance over reconciliation. Maggie's nights grew restless, sleep splintered by dreams twisted with regret and frustration. Yet, amid the despair, a faint glimmer of resolve began to rise. She refused to be swallowed by the narrative Andrew had spun, a narrative where she was the betrayed and broken woman. Fragile and undone, she began to consider the possibility of fighting back, not with bitterness, but with truth and firmness. With Olivia's unwavering support, Maggie started piecing together the fragments of Andrew's double life. Olivia accompanied her to their favorite coffee shop one rainy afternoon, where she pulled out her phone, showing Maggie messages and photos she had discreetly gathered from mutual acquaintances. There were dinner reservations made under fake names, late-night texts full of cryptic affection, and whispered confirmations of his frequent visits to a colleague's downtown apartment, proof that Andrew's betrayal extended beyond what even Maggie had dared imagine. Each discovery stung with fresh humiliation, yet paradoxically, it fueled a stubborn flame within her. She was no longer just a wounded spouse. She was becoming a woman informed and ready to reclaim her dignity. But the path was jagged and treacherous. Legal advice was confusing and intimidating. The weight of financial insecurity pressed down as Andrew's business acumen overshadowed her teacher's modest salary. Maggie doubted herself sometimes, wondering if she had the strength to see this through. Small defeats piled up. In one tense meeting with a divorce attorney, Andrew's high-powered legal team swooped in and dismissed Maggie's claims as bitter accusations, casting doubt over her evidence. Maggie left the office with her confidence shaken, feeling the walls closing in. But another conversation with Olivia that evening reminded her she was not alone, and that true strength often looked like rising, even when the world tried to bury you. In quiet moments, Maggie caught glimpses of hope, notes of kindness from her students, a teachers' association reaching out with resources, a coworker offering a listening ear. These shards of light pierced the heavy darkness, reminding her that life could be more than tame. Her birthday party had been a battlefield, and though she'd been wounded, Maggie was far from defeated. Now the war for her future was just beginning, and deep down, she knew she would need every ounce of grit and courage she could muster to reclaim the life that Andrew had tried to steal. If you're struggling to find hope when the odds seem stacked against you, remember, the journey is never easy, but resilience often begins with the smallest flicker of light in the darkest place. Keep fighting, because your story is far from over. Weeks spiraled into months, and Maggie found herself sinking deeper into a chasm of despair she hadn't imagined possible. The humiliation that had once been confined to a single dreadful night now seeped into every facet of her life, gnawing relentlessly at her sense of self. Every meeting with lawyers became a high-stakes battlefield where Andrew's power and privilege seemed to cast shadows too vast to overcome. Despite her mounting evidence, her careful collection of texts, emails, hidden meetings, and half-truths, the legal system appeared cold and indifferent, as if her pain was just another case number. The emotional exhaustion weighed heavily, squeezing out the optimism she had tried so desperately to hold on to. Then came the most shattering blow. at a court hearing meant to address temporary custody and financial arrangements. Andrew's legal team unveiled a fabricated narrative that painted Maggie as unstable and unfit, a woman overwhelmed by emotion, making rash accusations fueled by jealousy and bitterness. The judge, a stern man with little patience for drawn-out disputes, seemed to favor the version of stability Andrew's lawyers presented. The courtroom murmured with tension. Maggie's heart pounded bitterly as whispers erupted around her, echoing the unspoken doubt she had feared all along. Her closest friends and family tried to shield her, offering the soft words of comfort that only made her ache more. But the whispers outside the courtroom and online forums deepened the isolation. The headlines of gossip columns, fueled by anonymous leaks, made her the subject of public humiliation all over again. Perched precariously between a defeated victim and a woman fighting in vain. Her 35th birthday, already a scar on her heart, felt like a cruel joke embedded in the story the world was telling about her. The relentless barrage of judgment and loss hit Maggie at her most vulnerable when she least expected it. A chance encounter at the local grocery store turned into another humiliating ordeal. A woman from her neighborhood, once cordial but now visibly cold and pointed, whispered disparaging remarks loud enough for others to hear. Maggie's cheeks burned crimson. The sting of betrayal by her community was a sharp reminder that sometimes the toughest battles are fought not just inside a courtroom, but in your own backyard. As she stood by the produce aisle, clutching a cart and trembling with a mixture of rage and despair, tears finally slipped, unbidden but cathartic. It was the lowest moment she had faced yet. Public shame, legal setbacks, emotional isolation. The weight of it all nearly crushed her. But then, amidst the storm of self-doubt, a shiver of awakening began to pulse within her. How much longer would she let Andrew's lies dictate her worth? How many more nights would she spend drowning in someone else's betrayal? Maggie wiped her face with shaky hands, staring at her reflected image in a glass door nearby. Not a broken woman, but someone who still bore the flicker of fire behind tired eyes. Olivia's voice echoed in her memory. "You're stronger than you know. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning." That night, when the world seemed darkest, Maggie made a decision. She wouldn't let humiliation define her. She would find her voice, not for Andrew's sake, not for the courts, but for herself. She began drafting a message, a truth she was ready to share publicly, not in anger, but with clear-eyed honesty. This was her moment to reclaim power from the ashes of betrayal. Every painful step, every tear, and every harsh word had brought her here, to the edge of an unimaginable strength. The battlefield was still raging, but Maggie was preparing her greatest response. She was no longer the woman who stood silently as her life was ripped apart. The world would soon see the truth she had fought so hard to uncover. If you've ever hit rock bottom and felt the world closing in, remember, sometimes hitting that floor is what propels us to rise higher than ever before. Stay with us, because the turning point is closer than you think. After that shattering day, when everyone seemed to have turned against Harper, she spent the night staring at the ceiling of her small apartment. The echo of whispered insults and the sting of judgment kept replaying in her mind like a cruel soundtrack. For a long moment, it felt as if the world had swallowed her whole, leaving only shadows where her confidence once lived. But beneath that suffocating weight, a quiet flame flickered, refusing to be extinguished. The next morning, Harper avoided the usual routes to work, feeling the phantom stares of coworkers burning her skin. She shuffled down the quieter streets, seeking refuge in the embrace of the city's unnoticed corners. It was here, in an overlooked community garden, tucked between two towering buildings, that she first met Mrs. Delgado, an elderly woman known for her vibrant marigolds and whispered wisdom. Mrs. Delgado noticed the heaviness in Harper's eyes and offered a gentle smile. Their first exchange was brief but comforting. "Plants," she said, lifting a fallen petal, "sometimes need the hardest dirt to grow strong roots." Those words planted a seed of hope in Harper's mind as the days passed. At work, the fog of humiliation lingered. Harper tried to focus on projects, but every glance felt like a verdict. One afternoon, during a team meeting, her manager dismissed her ideas without consideration, echoing the earlier public shaming she'd endured. Her heart sank, yet she resisted the urge to retreat further into silence. Instead, she requested to discuss her contributions one-on-one, determined not to be invisible. Meanwhile, her closest friend Mia noticed the shift in Harper's mood and reached out. Over coffee, Harper finally shared the nightmare she was living, the whispers, the isolation, the unfair assumptions. Mia's reaction was fiercely protective. "You're not alone," she said firmly. "People who try to tear you down fear the strength you carry inside." Harper's days were a balancing act between drowning in self-doubt and grasping at the fragile threads of encouragement around her. She started documenting her experiences in a journal, painting her pain in words that no one else could erase. Writing became an act of defiance, a way to reclaim her story. One afternoon, as she watered marigolds in Mrs. Delgado's garden, Harper found unexpected counsel. The old woman shared stories of her own scars. Years ago, she'd faced harsh judgment for choices society didn't accept at that time. "Change doesn't come from shouting louder," Mrs. Delgado said softly, "but from standing quietly tall until others see your worth." Harper felt a quiet resolve rising within her, though the mist of uncertainty still clouded her path. Questions hovered. Could she reclaim her dignity in this sea of judgment? Was it possible to transform the sting of public shaming into a story of strength? The answers remained out of reach, yet a subtle determination began to thread through her thoughts. In the days that followed, Harper noticed small shifts. A coworker who rarely spoke smiled warmly, leaving a note that simply said, "I believe in you." The act, though small, felt monumental. It was evidence that not everyone had turned away. And somewhere deep inside, Harper understood that while the road ahead was daunting, it wasn't impassable. If you've ever faced moments when the world seemed to close in unjustly, take heart from Harper's journey. Sometimes the most profound strength is born in those quiet moments of reflection and unexpected compassion. Remember, even when it feels like you're at your lowest, the possibility for growth lies just beneath the surface, waiting patiently to bloom. A few days later, the office buzzed with a subtle shift, though no one could immediately pinpoint its source. Harper had begun arriving with a quiet confidence, carrying herself with a steadier gaze, despite the remnants of doubt still pulling at her. That morning, as she settled at her desk, an unexpected email caught her attention. A formal apology from her manager, acknowledging the unfair dismissal of her ideas during last week's meeting. It was brief, professional, but unmistakably sincere. The message twisted in her chest, surprise intermingling with cautious relief. But the real change came unexpectedly during the weekly company gathering. Harper was called to present a preliminary report on a project she'd been quietly developing. Her ideas birthed from long nights of reflection in the solitude that followed her humiliation. Her voice, though initially uneasy, grew stronger as she detailed innovative approaches she believed could reshape their division's strategy. As she spoke, the atmosphere transformed. Colleagues who had previously averted their eyes now leaned in, captivated by her insights. The room, once thick with skepticism, softened. Curious eyes met hers with genuine interest. Even her manager, sitting stiffly at the table, gave a nod of approval. But just as Harper was beginning to feel a flicker of acceptance, a cruel murmur cut through the room. Todd, a coworker notorious for his biting remarks, whispered harshly enough for some nearby to hear. "Finally showing up, huh? Took you long enough." A ripple of uncomfortable chuckles followed, threatening to unravel everything Harper had just barely begun to rebuild. Yet Harper, emboldened by months of inner struggle and, quietly, the old woman's wisdom about standing tall, did something unexpected. She smiled, not dismissively, but with a calm rooted in self-assurance, and responded, "Better late than never." The words hung in the air, simple yet potent, turning the jeers back on their source. An awkward silence ensued. The onlookers, sensing the shift, started murmuring support. "She's right," one said. Another admitted, "Her ideas could really help us." Even Todd's usual smirk faltered under the weight of Harper's composed defiance. Behind the scenes, unknown to most, this moment sparked whispers beyond the office walls. Others in the company's stairwells, previously indifferent, began discussing Harper's resilience and fresh ideas. The narrative was shifting, a testament to her quiet perseverance and refusing to be diminished. After the meeting, Harper received a message from Mrs. Delgado. "You are blooming, even in unexpected seasons." That simple note was a balm to her soul, a reminder that growth is not always visible. Sometimes it's the steady unfolding beneath storms. Later, a coworker approached Harper with an invitation to present at a regional conference. It was a chance to showcase her talent on a larger stage, and more importantly, reclaim her professional identity. The offer felt surreal, a direct consequence of her steadfastness amidst adversity. As Harper navigated this new chapter, even her harshest critics began to shift. Todd's biting remarks softened. Some stopped ignoring her in the hallway. It wasn't instant, but the tides were turning. Harper was no longer the figure to be pitied or mocked. She was becoming someone to watch. This turning point wasn't just about professional redemption. It was a statement of self-worth. A reminder that dignity is not granted by others, but reclaimed through resilience. If you're watching someone struggle under unfair judgment, consider that your words and actions can either bind them down or set them free. Harper's journey shows us the quiet revolution within kindness and courage, and how unexpected allies and small acts can ripple into transformative change. When you witness injustice, remember this: sometimes the greatest battle is to stand tall and own your story. That strength can quietly ignite the most profound victories. The days that followed felt like the turning of a tide long overdue. Harper, once the subject of scorn and whispered rumors, now walked with a newfound poise that reflected the battles she had fought silently. At work, her presence was no longer met with dismissal, but with nods of respect and curious glances that begged to understand the woman who had refused to be broken. The regional conference arrived swiftly, and Harper stood backstage, clutching her notes. The bright lights beyond the curtain, casting her shadow tall and unwavering. The hum of the crowd seeped through, filling the air with anticipation and nervous energy. For a moment, a flicker of doubt tried to creep in, threatening to dim the steady flame she'd nurtured. But deep within, the lessons from Mrs. Delgado's garden bloomed anew. The patience of the marigolds, the quiet strength in standing tall. When Harper stepped onto the stage, the room seemed to hush. The weight of expectation balanced against the promise of something fresh. She spoke with clarity and passion, weaving her personal journey into the innovations she proposed, the same ones that had been dismissed so callously just months before. Each word carried the weight of experience, the vulnerability of having been humiliated, and the unwavering resolve to rise beyond it. As her presentation concluded, the applause surged, a wave of affirmation that swept away the last remnants of self-doubt. Among the crowd, familiar faces from her office watched with surprise and newfound respect. Even Todd, who had once been quick to scorn, nodded in acknowledgement, no longer able to deny the spark of greatness that radiated from her. Back at the office, things visibly shifted. Projects Harper spearheaded gained momentum, and her ideas inspired colleagues to embrace new possibilities rather than cling to outdated routines. When her manager publicly praised her contributions during a team meeting, the room erupted in quiet cheers and knowing smiles. Harper felt the warmth of genuine acceptance, a stark contrast to the cold isolation she'd endured. Yet beyond professional victories, the emotional journey was just as profound. Harper found healing in the support of friends like Mia, who reminded her constantly that worth isn't measured by others' opinions. She also reconnected with Mrs. Delgado, whose garden visited by Harper on quiet afternoons became a sanctuary, a living metaphor of growth through adversity. Todd, confrontational no longer, approached Harper one day with an apology mingled with respect. "I was wrong to judge you," he said quietly. "You showed me what it means to be strong." Harper smiled, not out of triumph, but empathy. "We all have our battles," she replied. "What matters is how we choose to face them." In the end, justice wasn't served through confrontation or revenge, but through the steady reclaiming of dignity and relentless kindness in the face of cruelty. Harper's story became a beacon for others silently struggling, a testament to the power of resilience and grace. She learned that true strength isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to keep showing up, transforming humiliation into a catalyst for change. And in doing so, Harper not only redefined her own narrative, but inspired a culture of empathy and respect where once judgment had ruled. If you have ever felt crushed under the weight of unfair judgment, remember this: your story is yours to write. Like Harper, your strength can turn whispers of doubt into an anthem of hope, and through patience and courage, you can rise to claim the respect and peace you deserve. A few days later, the office buzzed with a subtle shift, though no one could immediately pinpoint its source. Harper had begun arriving with a quiet confidence, carrying herself with a steadier gaze despite the remnants of doubt still pulling at her. That morning, as she settled at her desk, an unexpected email caught her attention, a formal apology from her manager, acknowledging the unfair dismissal of her ideas during last week's meeting. It was brief, professional, but unmistakably sincere. The message twisted in her chest, surprise intermingling with cautious relief. But the real change came unexpectedly during the weekly company gathering. Harper was called to present a preliminary report on a project she'd been quietly developing. Her ideas birthed from long nights of reflection in the solitude that followed her humiliation. Her voice, though initially uneasy, grew stronger as she detailed innovative approaches she believed could reshape their division's strategy. As she spoke, the atmosphere transformed. Colleagues who had previously averted their eyes now leaned in, captivated by her insights. The room, once thick with skepticism, softened. Curious eyes met hers with genuine interest. Even her manager, sitting stiffly at the table, gave a nod of approval. But just as Harper was beginning to feel a flicker of acceptance, a cruel murmur cut through the room. Todd, a coworker notorious for his biting remarks, whispered harshly enough for some nearby to hear. "Finally showing up, huh? Took you long enough." A ripple of uncomfortable chuckles followed, threatening to unravel everything Harper had just barely begun to rebuild. Yet Harper, emboldened by months of inner struggle, and quietly, the old woman's wisdom about standing tall, did something unexpected. She smiled, not dismissively, but with a calm rooted in self-assurance, and responded, "Better late than never." The words hung in the air, simple yet potent, turning the jeers back on their source. An awkward silence ensued. The onlookers, sensing the shift, started murmuring support. "She's right," one said. Another admitted, "Her ideas could really help us." Even Todd's usual smirk faltered under the weight of Harper's composed defiance. Behind the scenes, unknown to most, this moment sparked whispers beyond the office walls. Others in the company's stairwells, previously indifferent, began discussing Harper's resilience and fresh ideas. The narrative was shifting, a testament to her quiet perseverance and refusing to be diminished. After the meeting, Harper received a message from Mrs. Delgado. "You are blooming, even in unexpected seasons." That simple note was a balm to her soul. A reminder that growth is not always visible. Sometimes it's the steady unfolding beneath storms. Later, a coworker approached Harper with an invitation to present at a regional conference. It was a chance to showcase her talent on a larger stage, and more importantly, reclaim her professional identity. The offer felt surreal, a direct consequence of her steadfastness amidst adversity. As Harper navigated this new chapter, even her harshest critics began to shift. Todd's biting remarks softened. Some stopped ignoring her in the hallway. It wasn't instant, but the tides were turning. Harper was no longer the figure to be pitied or mocked. She was becoming someone to watch. This turning point wasn't just about professional redemption. It was a statement of self-worth, a reminder that dignity is not granted by others, but reclaimed through resilience. If you're watching someone struggle under unfair judgment, consider that your words and actions can either bind them down or set them free. Harper's journey shows us the quiet revolution within kindness and courage, and how unexpected allies and small acts can ripple into transformative change. When you witness injustice, remember this: sometimes the greatest battle is to stand tall and own your story. That strength can quietly ignite the most profound victories.